So stories will either have an optimistic ending, an ambivalent ending, or a pessimistic ending. Now, Amour is one of the three examples of a constant character in a story that has an ambivalent ending. Now, constant characters in these stories, and in stories particularly with an ambivalent ending, have an amazing amount of internal strength. They understand who they are and they are resolute. But despite all of this, in terms of their character, Mullins says, and I quote, "Their situation is ambivalent at the end of the story because they haven't been able to resolve the conflict in their lives," end quote. Now, I particularly like stories that have more ambivalent endings because I believe that they reflect life realistically compared to stories that always have optimistic endings. Now, that's just a personal preference. That's not saying anyone else is right or wrong. That's just a personal preference. However, I do understand how audiences watching this movie would think that it is incredibly sad, because it is sad, and watching elderly people struggle to care for one another despite their love is very difficult. And Amour is also difficult because there is a sense of inevitability. Now, this was never, ever going to be a feel-good movie or have a feel-good ending. And just for reference, the other two movies that Mullins analyses as story arcs with ambivalent endings is Winter's Bone and The Hurt Locker. Now, back to Anne and George's. So, how do we know that George's is a constant character? Well, he makes a promise to Anne, and it's very clear what he does, and it's a clear point in the movie. So after Anne suffers a stroke and returns from the hospital partially paralysed after an unsuccessful operation, she makes George's promise never ever to send her to a hospital or into a home ever again. And he keeps this promise despite the significant story events that place him in a position to make a different choice. Now, so I'll quickly go through the story events that Mullins highlights in the book. And in the beginning of the story, we see the grim discovery of Anne's body surrounded by flowers. So again, it clearly sets up that this story is not going to have a happy ending. And then we flash back. Georges and Anne are retired, and they clearly love each other. They go about their day as you would expect an elderly couple to do. Then Anne has her stroke, and Georges makes his promise. Their lives are significantly changed by Anne's stroke, and they struggle to adapt to their new routine. And then George goes out and comes home one day to find Anne slumped on the floor after a suggested suicide attempt. So she tries to potentially throw herself over the window ledge and out the window. And then she tells him that she does not want to go on, but he keeps looking after her. He makes small improvements to her life, such as getting her a movable or a mobile wheelchair. And then they have a visit from their former music student, and he plays them one of her favourite songs. But then Anne has another stroke. And not only is she completely paralysed, she is also barely able to speak, and she is mentally degraded. Georges continues to care for her with the help of a nurse, but Anne's condition deteriorates and she is clearly in pain. And this is something that Georges cannot stomach, and he finds more difficult than everything else. He loves his wife and he wants to keep her with him. But when it's clear that there is little he can do to maintain her quality of life, he ends her suffering. Now, all through this movie, George's actions and his perseverance are evidence of his desire to keep his promise to Anne, and they're also evidence of his love for her.